Parisian style has a reputation for being maximalist, layered, collected, and full of old things accumulated over decades. But there is another Paris. Smaller, cleaner, and arguably more livable. The modern Parisian studio, minimal by necessity, stylish by instinct, where every square meter is considered and nothing exists without a reason. Here is what makes it work and exactly how to bring it into your own apartment. The first thing you notice walking into a modern Parisian minimalist studio is that it does not feel the way minimalism usually feels. There is no clinical brightness, no sense of things having been removed to make a point. The room is clean, genuinely, completely clean, and yet it feels warm, inhabited, quietly alive. This is the quality that distinguishes French minimalism from every Scandinavian, Japanese, or American version of the same aesthetic. The French arrive at emptiness through elegance rather than through ideology. They remove things not because owning less is virtuous, but because the room looks better without them. The motivation is aesthetic, not philosophical, and the result feels fundamentally different. A space that is edited rather than denied, refined rather than restricted. Central to the modern Parisian studio aesthetic is a process the French call the edit, the rigorous reduction of a space to only what is essential, beautiful, or both. This is not the same as minimalism in its purest philosophical sense, which tends to treat objects with suspicion regardless of their quality. The French edit is more discriminating than that. Every object that remains in a Parisian studio has survived a specific question. Does this earn its place? Not does it serve a function, and not does it look nice, but does it genuinely contribute something to the room that the room would be less without? A single ceramic carafe on the kitchen counter, one large art book on the coffee table, a pair of linen cushions that add texture without competing. Each object present because it passed the test, and the room better for the precision of that judgment. The modern Parisian minimalist studio is built on three materials that have defined French domestic interiors for centuries, and that continue to define them precisely because no contemporary alternative has improved upon them. Plaster, warm white, slightly textured, applied by hand rather than rolled, on every wall, giving the surfaces the living quality of something made rather than manufactured. Pale oak, on floors, on shelving, on the simple furniture frames, bringing warmth without weight, grain without drama. And linen, on the sofa, the bed, the curtains, in the natural undyed tones of flax, present in every soft surface with the same relaxed confidence that has characterized French interiors since the 18th century. These three materials require no color and no pattern to create atmosphere. Placed together in a small studio, they create a room that feels warm, considered, and unmistakably French before a single additional object is introduced. One of the defining characteristics of the modern Parisian minimalist studio is the relationship between the interior and the architecture that contains it. where maximalist Parisian style competes with houseman detail, filling the room with objects that exist alongside the molding and the parquet. Minimalist Parisian style steps back and lets the architecture be the design. A single ceiling molding in a room with almost no furniture becomes the most important visual element in the space. Herringbone parquet floors in a room stripped of rugs become the dominant texture, the thing the eye rests on and finds endlessly interesting. Tall casement windows in a room with no curtains except sheer linen panels become the primary source of atmosphere, changing the character of the space with every hour and every weather. In a modern Parisian minimalist studio, the architecture is not the backdrop for the interior. It is the interior, and everything else is edited down to allow it to speak. In a maximalist Parisian apartment, style is communicated through accumulation, through the density of objects, art, and furniture that together create a room with the richness of a life fully lived. In a minimalist Parisian studio, style is communicated through the opposite, through the single object that, given the entire room as its backdrop, carries more visual weight and meaning than 100 objects competing for attention ever could. This is the single statement piece philosophy, and it is one of the most powerful tools available in small space design. A large-scale vintage painting on an otherwise bare wall, an oversized ceramic vessel on an empty oak shelf, a single antique chair, the one old piece allowed into the modern room, that contains within it the entire historical weight of French design culture. The statement piece does not need to be expensive. It needs to be singular, chosen with enough conviction that it can bear the full attention of the room without flinching. Of all the qualities that make a modern Parisian studio feel genuinely elegant rather than merely tidy, proportion is the one most often overlooked, and the one most responsible for the difference between a room that looks designed and one that simply looks empty. Proportion in a small studio is about the relationship between the size of furniture and the size of the space, and specifically about resisting the instinct to scale everything down because the room is small. A single generously sized sofa in a small studio looks more elegant than two smaller chairs. A large format artwork on a small wall looks more considered than a small artwork on the same wall. A full-height oak shelving unit looks more intentional than a low bookcase. The French understand intuitively that scale creates confidence, that a room furnished with pieces that feel slightly too large for the space communicates a kind of ease and certainty that small, apologetic furniture never can. A minimal room lit by a single overhead source looks exactly like what it is, a minimal room. The same room lit by two warm lamps at low heights looks like something else entirely, a considered, intimate space that happens to be minimal rather than a minimal space that happens to have furniture in it. The French approach to lighting a modern minimalist studio follows the same principle as the traditional Parisian approach: no overhead light as the primary source, multiple warm points of light at human height, and a specific preference for the amber warmth of lower Kelvin bulbs that shifts the room from cool precision to warm intimacy as the evening arrives. In a studio of 25 or 30 square meters, two well-placed lamps and one candle are enough to completely transform the character of the space, from a clean, Consider daytime room to something that feels, in the evening, like the most quietly luxurious place you have ever spent an hour. Modern Parisian minimalism allows one plant, and the choice of that plant matters considerably more than it would in any other interior context, precisely because it is the only plant. The French preference in a clean, modern studio tends toward architectural plants, those with strong, unambiguous form that holds its shape and commands the space the way a piece of sculpture would. A large fiddle leaf fig that uses the vertical height of the room. An olive tree that brings the warmth and informality of the Mediterranean into the precision of a Parisian interior. A single tall monstera that adds organic form without softness, drama without chaos. One plant, chosen for its architectural presence and given the entire room as its setting, does more for the character of a modern Parisian studio than any other single edition available. It introduces the one quality that plaster, oak, and linen cannot provide on their own: life, in the most literal sense. The bedroom in a modern Parisian minimalist studio is the room where the philosophy of the entire apartment is most completely expressed, because it is the room where the French conviction that less is more luxurious, not less luxurious, is most thoroughly tested. A low bed frame in pale oak or in simple upholstered linen, dressed in white cotton that has been washed many times and is better for it. No bedside tables if the space does not allow them. Instead, a single wall-mounted brass reading light on each side, the fixture itself an object of considered elegance. One large artwork above the bed, hung without a frame or in the simplest possible frame, chosen because it is loved and for no other reason. Blackout curtains in natural linen that block the Paris morning completely when drawn, and that pools slightly on the floor when open, the one small extravagance the room allows itself. The Parisian minimalist bedroom communicates rest as a luxury rather than a necessity, and in doing so, it produces the deepest possible rest. Step back and look at the whole studio as one continuous, considered space. 25 or 30 square meters of modern Parisian minimalism, warm plaster walls, pale oak floors, linen in every soft surface, one artwork that earns the entire wall it inhabits, one plant that earns the entire corner it occupies, two lamps that transform the room completely as the evening arrives. Nothing is here by accident. Nothing is here by default. Every element passed the French edit, the rigorous question of whether it contributes something the room would genuinely be less without. The result is not a room that looks expensive. It is a room that looks decided, and in the vocabulary of French design, that is the highest compliment a space can receive. French minimalism is not about owning less. It is about choosing better and having the confidence to stop once you have chosen enough. Plaster, oak, linen, one statement piece, one plant, two lamps. The architecture allowed to speak. Subscribe for a new interior video every week. And tell me in the comments, what is the first thing you would edit out of your apartment if you were applying the French approach today?